Well, it certainly took them a while, but it's like the Supreme Court woke up and they said, okay, we'll engage. We hear you. Not across the board. I mean, some kind of surprising discoveries from Amy Coney Barrett in what she had to say about Trendy, Arugula, for instance, that did not sit well with a great number of you. These lower court activist judges continue. There are lower court judges that are already moving heaven and earth to try to stop the deportation of Trendy, Arugula, and they're doing it now in their home jurisdictions because that's what the Supreme Court said. Okay, these people can have their hearings, but they're going to have to do it in jurisdictions not in Washington, D.C. And so there are already lower court leftists in Texas that are like, we'll take it, we'll do it. So, judicial warfare is not going to go away. Julie Kelly knows that. That's why she's in business. And if you don't read what Julie writes, you need to. JulieKelly.substack.com. It's called Declassified with Julie Kelly. RealClearInvestigations.com is also where you can read her work. And she has a monster following on X at Julie_Kelly2. And I commend her work to you. We've relied on her so much over the years. Nobody covered J6 like Julie has, and since she's become sort of a armchair expert in all matters of the judiciary, hanging out in courts, so we go to her for this stuff, and we're so grateful she still makes time because she's such a big shot now. Hi, Julie.
I am not. Hello, Chris. Who's the big shot? You. Look at your big new platform, and I want to say thank you to Eddie for my Def Leppard walk-up music. I definitely needed that little shot this morning, so thank you, Eddie. Yeah.
For those not listening on great Salem radio stations all over the country, we'd like to play Julie a little Def Leppard on the way, and the guys on TV couldn't hear it. But Julie, here's the deal. Are you feeling better or worse, more comfortable, less comfortable with the Supreme Court? John Roberts, we always knew, was a bit of a snake. Sometimes Kavanaugh gives me heartburn. Coney Barrett, there's a theory that her family's been threatened. She's been threatened. We know that about her, unfortunately. Is she operating from a place of intimidation, perhaps, in these crazy rulings? What's your read on this body of people?
I think it could be partially the threats that were made against her and her family in the wake of the Dobbs decision. We know that even her children's names and where they went to school went online. Her outside of her home, there were activists. So, she's got younger children. So, of course, that's very troubling as a mother. So we certainly can sympathize with that. However, you still have a job to do, right? And really, since then, she's had inexplicable decisions, including this week siding with Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson in the dissent related to the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport illegal Venezuelans who are tied to Trendy, Arugula. Sonia Sotomayor's dissent is truly detached from reality. It was basically a cut and paste job from the ACLU's lawsuit. And she even at one point suggested that if the court allows the president to go forward with this Alien Enemies Act, that down the road this could apply to legal American citizens who would be snatched off the street, put on planes, and sent out of the country. That is just something Amy Coney Barrett should never lend her name to. I even go back to the Fisher decision, and this was the 1512C2 SCOTUS opinion that said very logically that that post-Enron corporate fraud statute should not be used against political protesters for January 6th. She dissented from the majority on that. Even Ketanji Brown Jackson was in the majority 6-3. And she, Amy Coney Barrett, claimed that that corporate fraud statute could be used against American citizens who went into a government building and disrupted congressional proceedings. So really head-scratching choices by Amy Coney Barrett. But look, we're stuck with her for the next maybe 30 years, unfortunately. So no one knows her true motivations, but all we can do at this point is speculate.
Are you pleased that they've decided? It seems. I mean, now this week, for whatever reason, it's this week that it seems like they're. I don't think they've fully. The House. I haven't talked about this today, and I'm sorry I didn't do that. I should have. My apologies to this audience because this is an important one. The House passed a piece of legislation yesterday to basically rein in these lower courts. I don't know if the Senate will take it up, but that's great movement from the House. I mean, Mike Johnson said we may just get rid of these lower court judges altogether. And the Supreme Court, I guess, is deciding it's time to start weighing in. I mean, there's going to be tons of these if they don't sound off and say, hey, you pipsqueaks and all these district courts all over the country, knock it off. You don't have jurisdiction to shut down the federal government.
You know, Chris, you and I have talked about this, especially the judges in Washington, D.C., and my coverage of the Trump trial there, not trial, the Trump case there, and, of course, all the J6 proceedings. Tweaking and taking the easy way out, which is legislation saying, okay, you need 3 district court judges on a panel, and then you have to put an injunction bond, and things that the American people really don't understand. I looked at that bill. It's rather confusing and probably intentionally so. It's also authored by Darrell Issa, who I don't really trust on these matters either. But look, we need impeachment proceedings. That's your job, Congress. And the reason why we have the unchecked, unaccountable, lifetime judges making these decisions is because they have no fear that there will be consequences for what they've done. I think the last time a federal judge was impeached by Congress was, I think, 30 years ago. They have created the crisis in the judiciary, and now they want to tinker around the edges and turn this into some sort of procedural issue. No, do your job. You get a
couldn't the I totally hear you, and I know there's a healthy, robust push to see impeachments, but couldn't the Supreme Court even act more quickly and say, we're not doing injunctions from district courts anymore for the nation. That no longer has standing. We do not shut down the country because one judge says so. That you can't do it. I mean, couldn't the Supreme Court just put that down and put it to bed?
I'm not sure. I think it would have to be brought to them in some sort of form for them to consider it. But again, we saw this with John Roberts. He came out right away after the president and others, including myself, called for the impeachment of Jeb Boasberg. He came out and said, you don't impeach judges over disagreements on judicial decisions. That's not what this is, though. This is partisan political activism from the bench that is very destructive. So, and furthermore, it's not John Roberts' place to opine about impeachment that is clearly under the purview of Congress. So he jumped to their defense, and he has done this repeatedly. So these judges need to be before the American people and explain themselves. You know, if you want to see these judges, especially in Washington, you have to go to the federal courthouse in Washington. You have to go sit in their courtroom, and you have to see what happens live. There's no audio. There is now an audio stream. There didn't used to be during J6. There's certainly no video. So you can't, but most Americans don't even know how to access an audio live to hear what's happening. Another remedy, and I've also been pushing for this, get cameras back in the courtroom. You can do this. You can do this to protect the jury if there are trials. These are simply hearings. We deserve to see, especially in our nation's capital, what these judges are doing, how they are treating the Trump administration, how these plaintiffs now who are filing these lawsuits not run roughshod, but judges are working hand in glove with them. Then that's what Darrell Issa should be calling for. We're going to defund these courts until we get cameras in there so the American people can see. This opaqueness also is contributing to the emboldened actions by these judges. I mean, they are literally living in a bubble. They fear no consequences. The American people can't see firsthand how they are behaving. And their rulings, they don't care if the Supreme Court overturns them. They're getting exactly what they want in the process.
Julie Kelly is with us. Declassified with Julie Kelly. She's at Real Clear Investigations on Substack, juliekelly.substack.com. Two of the things, our friend Dan Bongino, he's taken to X a couple of times to say, guys, I know you're not seeing things at the speed and the clip you'd like to see it. Trust me, we're on stuff you don't know about yet, but we'll get there. Just give us a second. I know you know Dan. I know you like him. Do you trust what he's saying when he says that? Because there are critics of people like Pam Bondi. I don't know so much Kash Patel, but people feeling like things are getting mired for whatever reason at DOJ and at the FBI, and justice is not being served here at the speed with which many of us would like to see it. So how do you read all that?
So obviously, I know Dan. I'm a friend of his, and I completely trust him. And I think what he's trying to signal as much as he can without giving away too much is we are working night and day. We are dealing with transparency issues, which means internal obstruction issues. And trust us, things are happening behind the scenes that we can't disclose yet, but we are going to get there. And look, it is completely irrational for people to expect to see FBI officials or DOJ officials in handcuffs already. Kash Patel has been there, I think, 8 or 9 weeks. Dan has been there 3 or 4 weeks. This is a 37,000 employee agency, rotten to the core. If you don't think that Chris Wray and his little toadies did not do whatever they could to set traps, to hide evidence, to bury the bodies that they need, that we want the scalps of, I mean, obviously, this is figuratively speaking, but you don't think that Chris Wray, I know you don't, Chris, but people who are now being skeptical about Kash and Dan, you think Chris Wray just left all this evidence in little folders on Kash?
Yeah, in the top desk drawer. Yeah. So do you extend that grace? It seems like a lot of people do not extend that grace to Bondi. Do you extend the grace to the Attorney General Pam Bondi or no?
Oh, definitely. Because you're also dealing with 100,000 employee, you've got 93 U.S. attorneys' offices that you had to get rid of the Biden appointee prosecutors there, replace them. We already saw what they had to deal with in the Southern District of New York in the New York field office when they tried to drop the Eric Adams indictment. You had internal resistance, not even internal. These prosecutors went to the media to talk about this case and how the DOJ should not be dismissing this politically motivated indictment. This is what they're dealing with across the system. Now, I will say, I'm not a huge fan of the Attorney General doing almost everyday interviews or press conferences. So I feel that trust is built by, limiting your public exposure and doing the hard work behind the scenes. I'm not saying that she's not doing that. I think the team around her, Chris, Todd Blanche, Emil Bove, her chief of staff, Chad Mazel, Stanley Woodward, who is a J6 attorney who I know. Yep. She's got a tough-as-nails team around her. So all right. People just need to be patient. You're not going to put a dozen people into that cesspool at the DOJ and FBI and start doing perp walks the next week.
All right, Julie Kelly. We're going to have you back very, very soon. Declassified with Julie Kelly on Substack. Do not miss it. At Julie_Kelly2 on X. Thank you, Julie, as always. Brilliant stuff.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.